Hello everyone and welcome. My name is Shinobiyuki TCG and this is my Megalonozuchi deck profile. I played it last weekend at the Kingslayer Cards Invitational event. If you don't know who Kingslayer Cards are, they are a card shop in Florida where they host big events for the community. This being the Invitational, you had to have gotten an invitation to this event. And then there was a big cash pricing for it. It was super awesome. Shouts out to them for hosting these events, both the Invitational and all of the regular ones. Super awesome for keeping the community here alive. It's been great. So, on to the profile. I played Megalonozuchi. This deck is, in my opinion, one of the stronger Dragon Empire decks. You could argue between it and Gandiva being the strongest. I went with this one since this one's a lot more aggressive, and I feel like the meta is extremely weak to aggro, including Gandiva, though it quickly can fall apart against Gandiva if they kill too many of your rears. But I think you can win the matchup, which I did during the event, though then I also lost to it in top 4, so that's why I was in top 4 and not top 2. But hey, still a very strong deck, and I can't wait to explain it all to you. So here we got the ride line, 0, 1, 2, and 3. The grade 0 is actually important in this deck, as the grade 1 and 2 can be called out of the bind zone, and you need a Shoujo Doji in the bind zone in order to have the Shoujo Doji name be on the Vanguard. And so the starter is actually important for keeping that intact. The grade 1 and 2 do very similar things. When they're placed on the Vanguard circle, they're going to look at the top 5 cards of the deck. Then they are going to reveal 2 stealths from those top 5. Then they're going to do a different thing depending on which one you're on. If you're on the grade 1, when you reveal those 2 stealths, you're going to be placing one of them in the soul, and the other is going to get bound. It is important to note that for both of them, when you only reveal one, it must go to soul, because it says you place one in soul and then the rest is whatever. So for the grade 2 Shoujo Doji, when you reveal those 2 stealths, the first one is placed in the soul and the second one is called instead of bound. So this will activate on places of your cards, so make sure you're looking for good call targets on that one. Then the Vanguard Megalonozuchi is what we've built our deck around. He has 3 very important skills. The first one is Act. He is going to bind any number of cards from the soul that have stealth in their name. Then he will gain a continuous skill until the end of turn that states that he gains the names of all stealth face-up cards in the bind zone. So he's going to have his own name plus all of those names. His second skill is you can counterblast 1, choose 2 rearguards and place them into the soul. Then you call 2 cards from the deck that have the same name as him and then give them 5k power. So since you have gained the names of all the cards in the bind zone, you have a whole pool of different cards you can call from the deck. And then his third skill is if your opponent's at grade 3 or greater, then all cards with the same name as him can attack from the back row, which means you're playing Magnolia in Dragon Empire. So, let's begin with the triggers, as that's the easiest to explain. We're playing 8 crit, and we are not planning to go to soul crits, because since this deck can attack with the entire board, you're not really going to be boosting with the go to soul crits. When it comes to fronts versus draws, I play fronts. Draws will deck this deck out. It already gets close to deck out as it is with them in. So fronts are just kind of required since we can't play more crits. But also the front trigger is just nice since the front row without Persona Ride can get a bit weak. And so this can help with that, especially since the Vanguard doesn't hit really big numbers on its own either. So this also helps. And also 20k shield. We got the Dragon Empire Overtrigger, which is still probably going to deck you out, but decks you out a lot less since the 50 card deck size increase, which this tournament was under, so thank goodness for that. Otherwise, this probably would have been the blue Overtrigger, just because the utility of that is very good and it's another crit. And then we play Vanilla Heals, because I don't feel like there are enough meta decks that play around one specific counter heal to warrant the amount of counter heals over just running 50k shield heals. So with that, we're going to move on to the next grade up, being grade 1. Grade 1 is where most of the utility of this deck comes from, as your beaters are going to be in the 2s and 3s. We've got PGs, Forktail, and Kagechika. So I have the alt arts, so it'll be Kodama instead of Forktail, but that's what this is. This is Forktail. So the stealth PGs are important as they are searchable and recyclable in this deck. And the searchability outweighs the use of Sanctitude being a 1-card PG in the one matchup that it would come up in, which is Jeweled, since you aren't really going to see Jet or Messiah. We aren't going to really see Stride deck sets until Luard and Shiranui come out, and so before that comes out, these are just going to be better because they are searchable. These two are your main piece searchers. This grabs from the drop zone and puts it into Soul. This grabs from top 7 of your deck and puts 1 into Soul. Kagechika can also just draw you cards when you call one of these from the bind zone with their secondary skills to Soul Boss 1 to do so. He can then be pushed to Soul to draw cards. This can also cheekily, if you've run out of Counterblast, if you have 2 Kagechikas on board, you can go call from bind and then push these 2 to Soul, and that triggers Unprecedented's plus 10k power if you can't use the Vanguard skill for some reason, like Counterblast. So, a very multi-useful card for utility reasons. That is the majority, that is all of the grade 1 lineup. Grade 2s, we've got Izaso, Hadendeso, and 2 more copies of the grade 2 of the Ride line. So this is important because you're guaranteed this name in the bind zone, which means if you are running out of good cards to call off the Vanguard skill, well, you're guaranteed these. And also, these cards are just free cards to put into Soul from deck with Forktail, or discard them, put to Soul with Kagechika, since, you know, you'd rather leave in the deck the other 3 copies of pretty much every other card in the deck. So these are just going to be free hits off Forktail, unless you see Forktail, because then you'd rather hit Forktail into Soul off Forktail once you already have your pieces, because you want to thin out of your deck the cards you don't want to clone. And he is kind of the last ditch clone target, because we needed 2 more slots. Izaso is what lets you search your PGs from the deck. He is on place Counterboss 1. If you have Shojidoji Vanguard, you can look at top 5, add a stealth, which can be PGs, Persona, whatever. And then when he's placed from field to Soul, he's going to give your Vanguard 5k, and he would put a card from the opponent's bind zone at the bottom of the deck, but that doesn't matter in this build, since this deck doesn't do any opponent binding. Hadendeso is going to be your grade 2 beater. He gains 10k when placed by Vanguard ability. When placed by Megalonozuchi, he hits for 24 on his own, 34 under Persona Ride, 32 if he has a booster without Persona Ride. So when you go first against, like, Gandiva, for instance, you want to call him out instead of Unprecedented, because you know Gandiva is going to kill it anyway, and you don't want to lose Unprecedented too fast. So you call these out, you make massive numbers, and you beat their face in when you go first. Very important for that. Also, this can be good in the early game, because when he's called off of, if he gets called off Shojidoji grade 2, well, he's at 19k, put a 8k behind him, he hits 27, while your opponent's at grade 1, which is kind of gross. Very fun card. And now for the most important package of this deck, the grade 3s. We've got Persona, Unprecedented, the card I've talked about a billion times because it's the heart and soul of stealth. And then we have Dual Wielder and Forbidal Surrogate. So, let's talk about Forbidal and Dual Wielder, since I'm sure everybody who's played a stealth deck, Shojidoji, or even Megalo before now, have read Unprecedented. I guess actually we can just talk about him first since he's so core. So, when he's placed by card ability, if you have a Shojidoji or Tamira Vanguard, you can pay a soul, draw a card. You'll be using Megalo to gain Shojidoji's name, so you'll have this online. and then he gains 10k if there are 2 cards put to the soul this turn, which will happen with the Vanguard skill for the most part. Now, Veadotube is nuts in this deck because it lets you pull Unprecedented out of the deck or Drop Zone, which is really good against Gandiva. But usually you need another half. Well, this is the other half of Veadotube, Dual Wielder. Dual Wielder is not usually run, especially outside of Megalonozuchi, but he is extremely good in Megalonozuchi for multiple reasons. One, since he's a grade 3, he's 13k, which means when he's attacking with the back row, he does not need any modifiers to hit, which means he can poke at the opponent for that minimum poke count, which is extremely good, as you want to be using your Vanguard skill to be calling front row, because without Persona Rider, your front row won't hit without boosts. So, grade 3s are just going to be very important in this deck because they can hit without being boosted. But his skill is actually also very important. His skill is when he attacks, you can counterblast 1. Well, if you have a Shoujodoji Vanguard, which you will, you pay a counterblast and you bind one of your other rear guards, and then you would return a card from your opponent's bind zone to the bottom of their deck. And if you can't, you will choose a stealth in your bind zone that is the same grade or lower than your Vanguard, and add it from your bind zone to your hand. This means that you can recycle perfect guards. This also means you have an extra layer of searchability in perfect guards with your ride line. If you find PGs off your ride line, if you know you're going to have access to a dual wielder, it is actually worth sending them to the soul in order to bind them with the Vanguard skill, in order to then add them to your hand with dual wielder. And like I mentioned before, Kagechika can place those PGs from the drop zone to soul after use, and then you can bind it, and then you can add it from the bind zone back to your hand with dual wielder. So, dual wielder has that double purpose of being a way to recycle perfect guards in a format where power numbers are absolutely massive. Recycling PGs is also equally massive. So that's why we run dual wielder at all, and why he is so important to this Veadotube package, especially since Veadotubing for Unprecedented, especially in the same turn that you double called Unprecedented, leads to so much card advantage that you kind of just drown your opponent in aggro, which is what this deck aims to do. It is an extremely aggressive deck. It does extremely well into decks like Youth. It does extremely well into Jeweled. You just have to play a bit differently into Jeweled because Jeweled does wipe your back row, which means you need to play a little backwards with this deck, but that's okay. It is very doable. And you are just going to aggro them out. It's the same with Gandiva, because Gandiva doesn't really do anything until turn 3, and you can just kind of push, and then hope that you can build your board back enough times for them to die before they get the upper hand. Sometimes it happens, sometimes it doesn't. I did it one round, and I didn't do it in top 4, which is what happens. But yeah, that is the deck. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you stick around. Subscribe to my channel for more card game content. It'll be more than just Vanguard, but Vanguard's one of the games I play the most, so expect to see plenty of it on here. Like the video if you like the information I gave. Leave a comment if you have any questions. I'd love to answer more stuff about the deck. Or if you just have any general questions, I'd be happy to answer. And I'll see you in the next one. Shinobi Yuki out. Peace.